In the first dynasty of Portugal, each kingship began amidst crisis, whether it was due to religious wars, armed conflicts with foreign powers, or even civil strife among family members. However, this pattern was broken by the ascension of King Fernando I to the throne in 1367. Endowed with immense wealth inherited from his father, Fernando became the wealthiest king in the history of the first dynasty. He enjoyed popular support and possessed an amiable personality that facilitated his relations with his peers. As a result, he demonstrated considerable success across various domains, including trade, alliance building, foreign policy, naval expansion, and agriculture. Notably, his reign saw the establishment of a formal alliance with the Kingdom of England. Nevertheless, as history often illustrates, no one is immune to errors, and Fernando proved to be no exception. He initiated devastating wars with Castile, which posed a significant threat to Portugal's independence, still in its early history. King Ferdinand I was born on October 31, 1345, in Coimbra, to Constança of Castile and Prince Pedro of Portugal. He was the youngest child of the couple, with an older sister and a brother who died in infancy. Upon his father's death in 1367, Ferdinand ascended the throne. Unlike his predecessors, King Pedro I took great care to avoid civil conflicts during Ferdinand's reign, ensuring a stable transition of power. Consequently, Fernando faced no civil wars at the outset of his rule, a rarity in Portugal at the time. Pedro's efforts to centralize power also left Fernando immensely wealthy, with vast treasures stored in the Tower of Lisbon. With considerable resources and stability, Fernando seemed poised to usher in a golden age for Portugal. However, his first significant misstep came with his marriage to the Portuguese noblewoman, Leonor de Teles, in 1371. Despite Leonor being already married, Fernando wed her clandestinely, granting her extensive lands and titles across the kingdom. When her previous husband attacked royal territories in response, Ferdinand retaliated, sparking a new conflict. The situation worsened when Fernando publicly recognized Leonor as Queen of Portugal, despite opposition from his half-brother Dinis, son of Pedro I de Castile. Mutinies erupted across the kingdom, and Leonor resorted to ruthless measures to quell dissent, executing leaders of rebellions and imprisoning others. Unable to gain popular support, Leonor began favoring her own family, granting them lands, titles, and influential positions, further exacerbating tensions. Even before his marriage to Leonor, Fernando needlessly antagonized neighboring Castile, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. Combined with his ill-advised choice of wife, these actions marred Ferdinand's legacy, tarnishing his reign with strife and instability. By the late 1360s, Castile emerged from a brutal civil war with Henry usurping the throne from his brother Peter I, whom he ultimately murdered. King Fernando of Portugal, claiming a right to avenge Pedro's death as the great-grandson of King Sancho of Castile, formed an alliance with the kings of Aragon and Granada to oppose the usurper. Many Castilians supported Fernando, particularly in cities such as Tui, Orense, Coruña, Ciudad Rodrigo, Zamora, and Alcántara. In June of 1369, Fernando invaded Castile from the north, launching attacks from both land and sea in Galicia. However, King Henry II of Castile responded, forcing Fernando to retreat to Portugal. Subsequently, Henry retaliated by invading Portugal, burning Braga, besieging Guimarães, and occupying territories along the northwestern borders. The siege of Guimarães was unsuccessful, and Fernando countered by sending a fleet of 32 ships to besiege Seville. The conflict persisted until 1370, when the Pope intervened. Fernando pledged to marry the daughter of the Castilian king to secure peace. The Treaty of Alcuin, signed in March, formalized the agreement. Nonetheless, this marked only the first of 3 wars between Portugal and Castile. Despite his pledge to marry the Castilian princess as per the Treaty of Alcuin, King Fernando ignored the agreement and officially wed Leonor de Teles in 1372, sparking a new conflict with Henry II of Castile. Meanwhile, in Northern Europe, England observed Portugal's resolute opposition to Henry's usurpation of the Castilian throne. Prince John, the Duke of Gaunt, who was married to Peter's daughter, and aimed to place her on the Castilian throne with himself as king, sought an alliance with Portugal. Recognizing Portugal's powerful navy, England signed the Treaty of Tagilde in 1372 with Portugal, in response to the English defeat at the Battle of La Rochelle, but also because a royal navy didn't exist yet. This alliance solidified political and economic ties, establishing a mutual defense pact. In fulfillment of this alliance, Fernando promised to support Duke John's claim to the Castilian throne, and England dispatched nearly 700 men to aid Portugal against Henry, whom they derogatorily labelled the Bastard. This alliance emboldened Fernando against the Castilian invasion triggered by his marriage to Leonor, initiating the Second Fernandine War. However, Portugal suffered dire consequences as Henry swiftly invaded, conquering border territories and advancing as far as Lisbon. Fernando's slow response left the capital besieged, exacerbated by the lack of support from Santarém, where the monarch was, and the lack of response by the Portuguese navy against the Castilian fleet that had arrived from Seville. The intervention of a papal legate eventually halted the conflict, leading to the signing of a treaty in 1373 between the Iberian monarchs, pledging to abstain from future hostilities. However, the terms heavily favoured Henry, compelling Fernando to dissolve the alliance with England and integrate Portuguese ships into the Castilian navy to attack England. Henry also retained control of key northern cities for 3 years to ensure Fernando's compliance. Moreover, Fernando's unpopular marriage to Leonor exacerbated his already precarious position, marking one of the darkest periods in Portuguese history. Yet, even darker times lay ahead. In 1373, despite Portugal being forbidden to ally with England, a new treaty was signed between the two crowns in London, in the renowned St. Paul's Cathedral. This occurred in the same year that the Second Fernandine War concluded. During this period, from 1373 to 1375, King Fernando initiated the ambitious construction of the Great Wall of Lisbon, aimed at fortifying the city against future invasions, a decision that would prove vital in the decades to come. On a different topic, the lingering impact of the Black Death persisted, leading Fernando to address issues such as rural depopulation by offering incentives, such as land grants known as cismarias, to encourage resettlement. In 1380, Fernando made a significant contribution to the navy by establishing the Company of the Carracks, an insurance company that provided ship owners with replacements if their vessels were lost or destroyed. These years, from 1373 to 1380, represented Fernando's zenith, marking his greatest contributions to the kingdom's history. In 1379, the death of King Henry II of Castile saw his son, Juan, ascend to the throne. With a stronger country, Fernando sought revenge against the Castilians after the humiliating Treaty of Santarém. To bolster his forces, Fernando sought to formalize the Treaty of Tagilde with England once more. Meanwhile, Count João Dandeiro, from Galicia, who had been sent to England by the Portuguese to negotiate previous treaties, was dispatched by King Richard II to revive the alliance. Fernando even proposed marrying his daughter, the future Queen of Portugal, to Prince Edward of England in exchange for military support. In 1381, the alliance was ratified, and shortly thereafter, an English fleet arrived in Lisbon. Simultaneously, Portuguese forces launched attacks on Castilian border territories. However, Castile retaliated by invading Trás-os-Montes and Alentejo. Portugal suffered a naval defeat in Huelva, and Castilian forces attacked Lisbon and its surrounding areas. The English alliance proved ineffective, as they engaged in looting and violence against locals in Lisbon, while in Alentejo they were denied access to castles and resorted to raiding fields, sparking conflict with the Portuguese. Consequently, even members of the Portuguese court began to sympathize with Castilian King Juan, who continued attacks on Sintra, Lisbon and Palmela. Due to the inefficiency of both Portuguese and English forces, Portugal signed the peace treaty with Castile in 1382, without the English knowing. Fernando conceded Almeida, Miranda de Douro and other border territories to Juan, agreed to provide ships for the English to return home, and promised to marry his daughter to Prince Fernando of Castile, Juan's second son. In the midst of the Western Schism, wherein European powers were divided in their support for either the Avignon or Roman papacy, Portugal found itself enticed by both popes. However, King Fernando ultimately aligned with the Roman Pope, agreeing with his ally, England. Regarding Queen Beatriz, initially slated to marry the second son of King Juan of Castile, circumstances quickly shifted. With the death of Juan's wife coinciding with the end of the Third Fernandine War, Juan sought a new wife and viewed the union with Princess Beatriz of Portugal as an opportunity to claim the Portuguese throne. In Portugal, Galician envoy Andeiro was dispatched to Castile to negotiate and formalize the marriage. The Treaty of Salvaterra de Magos, signed in April of 1383, solidified the union between Beatriz and Juan, potentially signaling the end of Portugal's independence. While figures such as the Queen, the Bishop Dom Martinho, and other nobles favored Castile, Fernando's correspondence stipulated that the Portuguese throne would pass to his grandson, the offspring of his daughter's marriage to Juan. Thus, Castilian succession would only occur in the event of Beatriz's death. Even as Fernando dispatched the document to Castile to officialize the marriage, he was greatly ill and nearing death, suggesting that the other members of the court likely influenced its contents. It's probable that Fernando, in his weakened state, didn't fully comprehend that he was essentially bequeathing the throne to a Castilian monarchy, thereby jeopardizing Portuguese independence. Shortly after the treaty's signing, Fernando passed away on October 22, 1383, at the age of 37. Queen Leonor assumed the role of regent for her daughter Beatriz, marking the onset of the interregnum period in Portuguese history. Ferdinand serves as a poignant example of a king who squandered advantageous circumstances due to excessive ambition and even arrogance. Nonetheless, his reign witnessed significant contributions to the kingdom, notably the construction of the Great Wall around Lisbon, the establishment of the Company of the Caracs, and the implementation of the Law of Cismarias. Each of these initiatives held crucial military, trade, and economic significance, respectively. Moreover, Fernando's efforts to forge an alliance with England paved the way for a significant partnership shortly after his death. These contributions underscore Fernando's capacity as a skilled statesman beyond the realm of warfare, leaving a lasting impact on Portugal. Still, even to him, his kingship and rule ended in the saddest of ways. The monarch showed profound regret in his final moments, when he was accepting the sacrament, by having said, "And I believe that he gave me these kingdoms to keep in law and justice, and I, by my sins, harmed them greatly." As he said this, he cried loudly, praying for God's forgiveness.